In recovery, I think it's important that you have guardrails. When we drive, we've got to understand that there's guardrails in place for a reason. And if you hit a guardrail, you probably are going to cause a little bit of damage to that guardrail, but most of the damage is probably going to be to your own vehicle. And in recovery, you've got to have guardrails. If you don't have guardrails, what happens is we begin to float in and out of risky situations. We float in and out of risky conversations, and we kind of find ourselves without any boundaries. And without any boundaries, without any guardrails in recovery, you end up damaging yourself. You end up damaging other people, included but not limited to your spouse, to other people caught in the crosshairs of your decisions. It's vital that you have guardrails, especially early on in recovery. Now, guardrails are vital for early on in recovery, but I will tell you, 11 years post D-Day, Samantha and I still have some guardrails in place. They don't change. I know that if I deviate in my life, I'm going to hit a guardrail. And when I hit that guardrail, it's going to damage myself. It's going to do a little bit of damage to the guardrail, but it's also going to have the opportunity to damage Samantha, maybe even my children, my job. You get where I'm going. There's guardrails that I have by my own decision, by my own commitment to protect me from damaging other people's lives. Now, let me give you a few examples because I want this to help you, especially if you're early on in recovery. But if you're farther down the road in recovery as well, you better still have some of those guardrails. For me, Samantha and I have agreed upon me not having any private female appointments or meetings. I will not be alone with a female for any kind of a significant meeting, anything that has the appearance of sketchiness. I just don't do that because, number one, for my own protection of my own heart, of my own temptation, but also to minister to Samantha a sense of security and confidence in my everyday life. Now, along those same lines is something that Rick taught me early on, which is no unaccounted for time. And I'll tell you, if there's one guardrail that the unfaithful spouse has to embrace and cultivate and establish in your life, is not having any unaccounted for time. Now, what does that look like? Well, I can tell you, I have Find My iPhone established on all of our phones. So Samantha, who's learned how to use it because of mostly our kids, she can find me anytime that she wants. If my phone is ever on airplane mode, I am in an incredibly important appointment that there can't be any interruptions, but I'll tell you that's really almost never a part of my life. She can find me at any time. She knows exactly where my office is. She knows where all of our baseball games are. She knows any time that I have a meeting where I'm going to be. And we're 11 years down the road and she doesn't micromanage this, but it's become such a part of my life. When I say, hey, I've got an appointment today at 5 o'clock at such and such restaurant. I don't just say, hey, I have a meeting at 5. It's just kind of part of me that I say, hey, I've got a late meeting at the office, or I've got to meet so-and-so at this company, or what have you. She just doesn't even have to ask me because it just kind of became part of my modus operandi that I say where I'm going and where I'm going and when I'll be home. I don't want some of you to get the wrong idea. I hear from spouses all the time where they say, I just can't live this way if we're going to be checking up on each other the rest of our lives, and if I'm going to be under the microscope forever, and if this is going to be the way it is, then I don't know that I can do it. And I usually talk to that person, and depending on how well I know them and how much time I've spent with them, I say, that's a load of crap, okay? It's easy to do. If it's hard for you to disclose where you're at and when you're at that place, if it's uncomfortable for you to be tracked on your phone, if it's uncomfortable for you to have to disclose where you're at, and it's really a violation of you as an individual to not have any unaccounted for time, then I'm going to tell you, as someone who's been where you're at, your flirting with disaster. You're not being totally honest. There's something you're trying to hide. You have a guilty conscience. There's something awry in you that you are not comfortable living an open and bare life for your spouse to know where you're at any given time. Those are strong words. But if you're serious about recovery, it's going to have to be that way. Another guardrail that we have in our marriage is that we don't shame each other. Samantha almost never, even in our whole recovery, but certainly now and even early on, we outlawed her shaming me and saying, well, you this, this, and this. And I was never going to allow myself to say, well, if you, now early on, I did that a few times, and early on she did that a few times, but it didn't take us long to set up a guardrail that says, no, we're not going to do that because we're not just going to damage our spouse, we're going to damage ourselves if we allow that behavior to continue in our life. Another guardrail that we have, and we've done a lot of work, a lot of reading, a lot of research on this, is that we have a guardrail of staying connected. Just a couple of days ago, we had a little tiff, if you will, and she just said the magic word, which was, I feel disconnected from you. And that in me went, oh crap. Now, human nature wanted to go, I've had a long day and I've been doing this, but I didn't for very long, just for a couple of seconds, and I was like, okay, guardrail. So I did the dishes and I said, hey, come upstairs, let's talk for a little bit. And so I just said, listen, I'm sorry we're disconnected. I've just been busy. You've kind of been busy, but let's at least try and do some repair work right now. And so we just spent a few minutes kind of talking. And she was a little bit fired up, so it was a little difficult for her to loosen up. But we at least had this moment of connection where I invited her into my world. And she kind of said, wow, you've been busy. There's been a lot going on. I said, yeah. And then, but I immediately was like, so how are you doing with A, B, and C? It's about a guardrail that will keep you connected. You've got to have these guardrails. I don't know what they look like for you, but there's got to be those guardrails, and you both have to be able to identify them. And remember to ask yourself, what will it cost me if I don't do this? What will it cost me if I don't have these guardrails in place? I guarantee you it's going to cost you a lot.